Yes, hello and welcome into another episode of 5 Rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. 5 Rounds is proudly served by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. I was just at the Quarterdeck on Monday. I had the French dip sandwich, which is delicious. Always the toughest thing when I'm at the Quarterdeck is deciding what to eat. I was debating between the French dip and the mahi-mahi sandwich. I basically flipped a coin. Happy hour never ends at the Quarterdeck, my friends. 2-for-1 happy hour all day, every day. And for our audience, this is probably the most important detail. The Quarterdeck has every UFC pay-per-view fight for zero cover charge. Don't go to one of these sports bars that tries to charge you $15-20 a head. You won't get any of that nonsense at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. No cover charge at the Quarterdeck for a UFC pay-per-view fight. It is absolutely the place to be, my friends. If you want to peep their menu, the seafood is delicious. The sandwiches are great. The ribs or meat falls off the bone. If you want to peep their menu before you go or find the location nearest to you, visit their website, quarterdeckrestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. And gentlemen, we are going to be giving away on today's show, I have it actually in my hands right now, a gift card, a $20 gift card at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. It's tempting to keep this for myself, but I couldn't do that to you guys. We're going to be giving away a $20 gift card tonight. Here's how we're going to do it. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to give you guys a code word. Okay, I'm going to give you the code, and then later this hour, you don't know when it's going to happen. It might happen on a complete whim. It might happen, even during one of the interviews we have today. I'm going to tell you guys on the live chat here for those watching us on YouTube to unleash the code word. So I'm going to give it to you in a few minutes. And then, Manny Fernandez says he could use it. Who couldn't use a $20 Quarterdeck gift card? So in a couple minutes, I'm going to give you the code word. I'm going to wait a couple minutes because I know sometimes Miami time people jump into the stream a little bit late. So I want to give the opportunity to as many people as possible. I'm going to give you the code word. And then at some point in the 6 o'clock hour, I'm going to tell you guys, now is the time. Unleash the word. And you're going to write it in our comments. And I don't know, guys, how should we do this, Frank? Should I say the first person to comment with the code word wins? The third person? Should we choose them at random? Like, how should we do this, you think?
Yeah, we got to do that hokey radio thing, right? The 7th or the 9th or the 19th. You got to just pick a random number so that, no one's quite sure.
All right, fair enough.
It's not very scientific. It's not very scientific around here. I mean, I'm not sure how Manny's going to end up doing it, but somebody will win that card.
We're going to figure it out, man. And so we got a lot to get to on today's show before I introduce my co-hosts here. At 6:30, legendary Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports, boxing and MMA scribe, is going to join us at 6:30. We're going to talk some Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley with Kevin. We're going to talk some UFC with Kevin. We're going to talk some boxing with him. We have a lot to get to with Kevin Iole. And then at 7 o'clock, good friend of mine who's hit the big time. He left me back, behind. But Danny Segura from MMAJunkie.com. I respect this guy so much. Years ago, guys, 8, 9, 10 years ago, when I was commenting fights at Fight Time Promotions, I used to always see Danny, who's younger than me. He was like barely out of high school, and he used to bust his butt covering every event for his YouTube channel. And he would wear like a full suit at every event and like really work hard. And then eventually he leaves, the local scene to go write for MMAfighting.com. And he was a co-host of the MMA Hour with Luke Thomas. That was after Helwani went to ESPN. He was on the MMA Hour with Luke Thomas, and now he's at MMAJunkie.com doing great. I saw him at the PFL event last week. We caught up, so I think Danny Segura is going to be a great guest tonight. One of the hardest working men in the MMA industry is going to join us. That's going to be at 7 o'clock tonight. So let me introduce my co-hosts. You see him in a very empty room. I feel like, you guys make fun of the room that I'm in, but Frank Zaffere is in is that like a, what do we call a flop house? Like, where are you tonight, Frank?
I am in a secret location perched high above. This is like a loft situation I got up here. I had a foosball table in the background, and I thought that might not look good, so I shoved that out of the way. So you guys could let me know, is a foosball table better than an empty room? I don't know.
There you go. Notre Dame trophy room since 1988.
Okay.
Oh
Okay.
man. So we have Frank hiding from the feds in the flop house. We've got James Walker in his usual home setup. James, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. And Alex, I'm appreciating that hat. That's an awesome Bitcoin hat, man. Where'd you find that? I need the story behind that.
Amazon. Basically I decided, and by the way, my wife hates when I wear Bitcoin gear because she's like, well, what is that? Are they paying you? And I'm like, well, no, I paid for it. I really like crypto. So I've got a Bitcoin hat. I've got a Bitcoin t-shirt. I've got an Ethereum t-shirt. Okay. And my wife is trying to veto it. And I tell her like, hey, in a couple of years, when it's at like 20 times what it is now and we're rich, you're going to be happy that I wear Bitcoin gear. But she's not happy right now about it. So.
I'm bullish on Bitcoin too. So the other ones I'm not sure, but Bitcoin I think is going to work out pretty well. It already has worked out pretty well for some people.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So all right, I think we've got a few people settling in, watching the stream. I want to give out the code word. So keep in mind, for those who missed the first couple of minutes, we have a $20 quarter deck gift card on the line that's going to be given out before the 6 p.m. hour is over. It might be 6:15. It might be 6:59. At some point this hour, we're going to give away a $20 quarter deck gift card. And the code word, gentlemen, and be ready with your typing fingers, Manny, because I didn't even give this to him in advance. The code word is Diaz.
Yo, surprise.
D-I-A-Z.
Nobody had to tune in to know which code word it was going to be for you. Kick this program off.
Yes. The code word, and don't comment now. So what we're going to do later this hour, I'm going to tell you guys watching us live on YouTube to comment with the code word. The code word is Diaz, D-I-A-Z, in case you had any doubts about that. Alex M asked, Nick or Nate? Both, just their last name, Diaz, D-I-A-Z. So later this hour, we will ask to type in the code word. And I don't know, for tonight, why don't we do the first person to type it in, just so you guys have to be really on the ball. Then maybe next time we'll do like the 50th person to type it in. So later this hour, when I ask you guys to type in the code word, I see like Manny Fernandez is typing it in already. So, bro, I'm going to give you the cue later on. You don't have to have the itchy trigger finger. Oh, man. So first of all, guys, coming up this weekend, we have PFL on Friday night, more semifinal fights, which are actually going to be locally here in South Florida. We have on Saturday, we've got a UFC Fight Night card with the two best kickers in the UFC, Chikadze and Barboza. Like someone's lights are going to be knocked out with a high kick or a body kick. That much is for sure. And we also have Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley. So let me ask you first, James. Yep. I would imagine an astute fight fan like yourself is going to find a way, DVR, to make time for all three. But which of those three events do you prioritize? PFL, UFC, or Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley?
You got to go UFC. I mean, it's always UFC in terms of, when it comes to mixed martial arts. But I don't know if the casual fan agrees with me. I mean, look, it's a Edson Barboza fight. I think, the hardcore fans, the regulars, can appreciate Barboza, that he always brings it. He doesn't win them all, but I think he's an exciting fighter to watch. So that's really what I would be watching for. But yeah, there is some intrigue with Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley. I think that's probably his toughest test to date. I don't like how they're advertising Woodley as a elite striker. I think that's false. I mean, he came up as a wrestler, his entire career. And yes, he's knocked out some people with his right hand, but that wouldn't qualify him as, this dynamic striker that they're trying to build him up to be. So I think it's interesting what they're doing there. And I think it's an interesting matchup. I haven't really thought about who would win. I'm curious to hear the odds. Do you have the odds on that fight?
Jake Paul's favored. I can look up the exact odds, but he is actually favored to win the fight. And I think part of that, and Alex M says he's betting the house on Jake Paul. Wow. Jake Paul is bigger. Like, he is larger than Tyron Woodley. And like, he's actually
in height.
Yeah. And I think he'll be cutting more.
Yeah, but I mean, Tyron's a feat of muscle. I mean, he looks like a superhuman muscularly. I mean, Tyron's just really short. So I think that those matchups when they're facing off look.
But a height difference in boxing is really important, though. It's everything.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Frank, which event do you prioritize? PFL, UFC, or Paul versus Woodley?
Well, I'm prioritizing the UFC for the reasons that James said, but I mean, this Paul Woodley thing has me intrigued and bothered and curious and a little upset. It has me. I have all the emotions about it, so it's really kind of in the front of my mind. But $60, no, probably not going to do that.
And by the way, Paul is actually a pretty sizable favorite, minus 200.
Wow.
T Wood is plus 160. Okay. So so if you do like Alex bet the farm on Paul, like the return is not even that great. Like if you bet $100, you're winning 50 back, $200, you're winning 100 back. So I don't know, man. I think I'll probably not bet that fight out of protest. But if I am going to put like literally a few dollars on it, I'll probably put a few dollars on Woodley just because the return is so much better. But the thing is, like, and we've talked about the Paul brothers on this show before. We don't make a habit out of it, but we've talked about them before. Just because Logan Paul is a complete joke as a boxer, it's not necessarily fair to group Jake into the same conversation. Now, the one thing about Jake is, and I know Frank is going to laugh when I say this, he's not actually fought a real professional boxer. So like he's looked good. He's looked really good as Jake Paul. He's looked really good against Ben Askren, who has never thrown a punch in his life and showed up fat for the fight. He looked really good against a former NBA player.
Nate Robinson.
Yeah, and who was James? Because I think he's 3-0. Who was the first guy that he fought? I don't even remember who Jake Paul's first. Was it like against another YouTuber or something? But like he's looked really good just against non-professional boxers. But Woodley also not a professional boxer.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that interests me about this. Paul has a lot on the line here because if he loses, I feel like his train is kind of derailed because part of the spectacle is that he keeps winning. And they're carefully picking opponents and kind of slowly upgrading the competition, even though, as you mentioned, they're not necessarily professional boxers. But I think if he loses, a ton of the shine, a lot of the spectacle is kind of taken off this. And like, okay, the YouTuber finally got beat. No reason to pay $60 again to see him try to, win another fight, so to speak. So there is some pressure, involved in this on his side because he's making a lot of money. Sort of hand-picking fights that aren't necessarily, most boxers with the 4-0 record or 3-0 record would be in danger with that. So, and Tyron Woodley doesn't provide a threat in that sense. He provides more of a threat than Ben Askren, and as Ben Askren provided more of a threat than Nate Robinson. So it's kind of slowly moving up per se. So it's good, it's good hand-picking by his management in that respect.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Frank. You're laughing, so I'm sure you got some.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is hand-picked. I mean, you're right. The escalation in opponents is based on him maintaining the enthusiasm.
So Frank, where does he go from here? Like if Paul beats Woodley, then what type of fight does he get next? Like a retired boxer? Like, is he ready to fight actual active pro boxers after this? Like, who does he go after next?
No, I mean, this is all about big money. So I think the fight after this would be a legit striker who's retired from perhaps mixed martial arts. Maybe Anderson Silva, who's actually now boxing. That would be the next really big money fight if he can get through this test. But this test is not really a test for him. I mean, Tyron shot, and the sadness for me is that, look, I don't want to ever get or suggest, and I'm trying to get between any athlete and his ability or her ability to make money. And I understand what Tyron's doing here. He's going to cash a really big check, but he's going to cash a huge check potentially and probably at the expense of his legacy to some extent, at the expense of the perceived integrity of the sport we love. So those are the victims of this Jake Paul embarrassment that we are going to see, which is Jake Paul's going to tune him up. And Teddy Atlas had a great breakdown in the fight. I mean, I think he's right on the money as he usually is about boxing. And so those are my sad points about this.
Yeah. In fact, I've got the Atlas quote in front of me. Teddy is picking Jake Paul to win by knockout. Now, I also kind of wonder with Teddy Atlas, because I don't think he likes mixed martial arts and respects it very much. Whenever like he's picking an MMA fighter to lose in boxing, I always wonder if there's an agenda with Teddy. But I think he like both can be true. I still think he might be right here, even if he does have an agenda, right? Because he's very much like a purist of the sweet science. So I think he might, but also it's not like Jake Paul is some great boxer, but still, I don't think Teddy wants to see an MMA guy come in and like win a boxing fight. But Teddy Atlas said about Woodley, he's going to be the smaller guy, the lighter guy, he said. So Paul's the bigger guy. He's strong. He has that advantage, and he has the opportunity to throw, which is a decent right hand that he possesses. He's got the opportunity to throw it and land it because of the style of Woodley and the mistakes of Woodley. Woodley stands straight up. He says he's predictable. He throws that slow jab. He throws it halfway out. He lets you get close. Paul's got a good right hand. He's going to land the right hand. So bad news is Paul is going to knock him out. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But James, I also think it's unfair for Teddy Atlas to break down Woodley's MMA stance as if that's going to indicate his boxing stance. Because like you have to understand, you know, the way Woodley strikes in MMA, he's not, I would hope not anyway, going to stand the same way, because you also have to be aware of kicks and knees and takedowns. So it's completely different. I would hope that in Woodley preparing for a boxing fight where none of those other elements come into play, that he doesn't approach it striking wise the same way he approaches MMA, because there's a reason why you stand differently in an MMA fight than a boxing fight.
Yeah, you mentioned the biggest reason, and that's the threat of the takedown, which is not applicable in this fight. So, if Woodley's doing his due diligence and training the right way, which it looks like he is from, you know, a lot of the comments and who he's training with and things like that, he's going to have a traditional boxing stance. But I just don't think you can learn it that fast if you're not a natural striker, which Woodley is not. And what's been the biggest complaint with Tyron Woodley in his last 3 or 4 fights? He hasn't let his hands go. He's had that power for all of his career, and he used it to become champion. But then it came a point in his career when he got older and he stopped letting his hands fly. So it'd be interesting to see if he's able to revert back when that's all he can do in this fight is sort of let his hands go, when he hadn't really done it in his last few fights against Gilbert Burns and Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman. And also just to go back to the price, I wouldn't pay $60 right now to see Woodley in an MMA contest.
Right.
So
no, you're right.
Why would most people pay $60 to see Woodley in a limited capacity against what his expertise is? So, but you know, the general public, they're going to do it anyway. I'm sure it's going to get a bunch of pay-per-view buys. I mean, we're talking about it now, so you know, it's just kind of the state of things. It's kind of sad in a way.
Alex, I don't. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to jump in. I mean, you were taking some shots at Teddy Atlas there. I actually don't begrudge the way he's breaking it down. I mean, first of all, boxing is his sport, and it seems like it's become this hobby of MMA guys to jump in there as if it's something easy for them to do. And I can understand boxing purists getting a little irritated. It's a completely different game. Yeah. And, you know, I think we all should be, you know, everyone should be up to speed on that now after the forays that we've seen. But also in breaking down the fight, all he's got to look at is Woodley MMA striking. That's all he's got to look at. So he's got to break down the stance he sees, and he's 100% right. I mean, Woodley's bomb right hand is completely set up, as James pointed out, by the threat of his wrestling and his takedowns, and he's lazy with the jab. He's right. And, look, a few months of practicing, no, it's going to be awful. So, and it's going to be sad. And I don't know why how big does the check have to be for Tyron to allow his legacy to include this? The skid he's been on has been to real fighters, really great fighters. You know, that softens it a little bit. Now it's a YouTube guy, and I think he's going to lose this fight. And now he's lost to a YouTube guy.
Well, and I want to pick up on that point, and let me get James to chime in on it first, because Frank teased it a little bit. So, like we all know, Tyron Woodley, former MMA fighter, former UFC champion. Like this was in his day, or he's past his prime now, but in his day, he was an excellent mixed martial arts fighter. If he now makes this jump into boxing, and if he gets knocked out by a guy who's more known for his YouTube content than his boxing, is that any kind of a tarnish of the sport of MMA? Like, James, do you think people are going to look down on mixed martial arts a little bit? Hey, the MMA champ just got knocked out by a YouTuber.
No, I don't think it's as indicative against MMA as we thought it might be. Say, 7-8 months ago when Ben Askren got knocked out, by Jake Paul. We kind of thought that, that's going to be a black mark on MMA, but time is gone, and now it's just kind of a joke, and nobody really cares. I think, as Frank had mentioned, it's more of a stain on Tyron Woodley. I mean, this is a guy that 3-4 years ago we were talking, or not we were, but there was a conversation about him being one of the greatest welterweights of all time, and then, when he was making all his title defenses, and then, he went on his losing streak, and just, I think he just kind of, age just kind of caught up to him. But yeah, I think this potential loss would really hurt his legacy more so than the sport of MMA.
Frank, what do you think? Because I agree with James. I don't think it's a stain on MMA, because we're seeing so many of these crossover fights now that it's become a really normal thing. And, a few years ago, Conor McGregor boxed Floyd Mayweather, and he didn't look terrible. I think Floyd carried him a little bit, but McGregor had some success, and that actually won over some people's respect. All right, the MMA, you take away the kicks and the knees and the takedowns. Not that Conor does too much of that, but you take away all those things, and he held his own for a little bit. So I think we're kind of past that. I think we're past that idea that people are going to think MMA fighters jumping into boxing, that they would tarnish the sport. I don't think that's a factor. I agree, Frank, with your original point that it's more of a tarnish to T. Wood, or do you disagree? Do you think it would tarnish mixed martial arts?
Rampage Jackson, who you guys remember Rampage, right? He did the A-Team movie, and the studios told him, don't fight Rashad Evans before this movie comes out, because we don't want you to potentially lose and then take some of the shine away from this movie. I mean, for the casual fan, and the impression and the image that casual fans had of Rampage Jackson, and this was within his chosen sport of MMA, the thought of losing was going to tarnish it for the casual fan. They would be like, well, now I can't accept this idea of Rampage being this terrifying force playing Mr. T in this, this silly movie, because I just saw him get knocked out or whatever by Rashad, or they ended up losing by decision. Fast forward to now, a lot of casual fans, Tyron Woodley, he's a fearsome, guy who was, the next great thing in the sport. I mean, he had the physique, and he's in the movies, and he's, his career was meteoric before it fell completely off. So I think seeing him lose like this, I think it's a tarnish on the sport. I think for the casual fan, for the person who's just in it once in a while for the big fight, they're like, oh, these guys aren't that tough. These guys aren't that tough. That guy was a UFC champion. He just got knocked out by a YouTube guy. I mean, yeah, I don't think there's any way that isn't a stain. I don't think that there's a way that isn't a shot on UFC roster, and the impression that the casual fan has of the UFC roster.
By the way, I agree with that. George St. Pierre on Captain America. He was in what was it? The second Captain America, Winter Soldier, and he was in the what is that? The TV show, the Marvel show that was on Disney Plus, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He was actually had a bigger role in that. He was pretty good, man. I mean, most of his acting was speaking French, so I don't feel like he was acting all that much. He mostly spoke his native language, which was kind of a cop out, but I thought he was fine in that. By the way, speaking of tarnishing sports, maybe there is something to Frank's point, because I noticed over the past weekend, I do not watch pro wrestling, only once in a blue moon. I barely follow pro wrestling, but everyone is losing their minds over CM Punk. Did you hear that buzz? I don't know. Maybe James actually watched it. Like CM Punk.
Watched it live.
You did? So he showed up, what was it, AEW in Chicago, CM Punk? And people are making it's the biggest thing that ever happened to pro wrestling was CM Punk back in pro wrestling. This guy clowned himself in the UFC. He got it. How do I take CM Punk seriously when he got a chance to actually fight? And he lost to Mike the Truth Jackson. He got clowned by Mickey Gall. So, I mean, how can I take CM Punk seriously when you gave the guy an opportunity to fight for real? And he did not even look competent in the octagon. Did not look even somewhat competent. And pro wrestling fans make a huge deal out of CM Punk coming back. That guy can't win in a back alley. And I respect some of these pro wrestlers. Brock Lesnar, NCAA champion, former UFC champion. I respect that guy. Kurt Angle, when he was wrestling, an Olympic gold medalist. So it's not to say I don't respect any of these pro wrestlers, but how can I take CM Punk seriously after he embarrassed himself in the octagon?
Alex, it's pro wrestling, man. it's the art, and I think the difference between MMA fans and wrestling fans, and some people are both. I grew up a big wrestling fan, and now I'm a big MMA fan. But wrestling is more of an art. It's more of telling a story physically. The bumps are real. The fighting is fake, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So them falling on the mat and taking the hits and falling out the ring, all that stuff is real. But the actual punches and all that kind of stuff is fake. So it's more of an art. And CM Punk as an artist, as a wrestling person creating art, he's up there with some of the best. So to take a 7-year absence and to come back in his hometown of Chicago was a big moment, not just for AEW, but it was a big moment for pro wrestling. So people like me who are older and used to watch it more for the artist side of wrestling, not necessarily for the freak show and all that stuff that they have now, can appreciate a real wrestler coming back. Now, he's not a real MMA fighter, obviously.
Did he actually wrestle? Like when he came back, he just talked, right? Like, did he actually get in the ring?
No, he talked. He's going to wrestle on pay-per-view. They're going to make money off it. So
he better lose. Like they better make him lose the wrestling match, because if CM Punk comes back and he actually wins a wrestling match, how do I take it seriously? Because the guy can't win a real fight.
It's art, man. You gotta separate the two, man. It's art. Just like if you see an MMA fighter, go into the pro wrestling ring, you got to kind of suspend reality for a little bit. But that's a whole nother podcast. We'll go over that maybe on Sean Stanley's podcast someday.
That's right. Yeah, I want to crash that podcast because I'm sure those nerds, and they do a great job. And even our guy Jonathan Ramlakan is also a big wrestling fan as well. So like Sean Stanley, Jakari Gibbons, and Ramlakan, they do the pro wrestling show here on 5 Reasons. It's a very good show, but I should go on the show to debunk the entire quote unquote sport, because it's like you nerds are making this huge deal about CM Punk. Like, I think I could beat him up. Like that was the conclusion that I came away with, that I could literally beat up CM Punk. He got punked. CM got punked in the octagon. How do I take this guy seriously? By the way, Kevin Aioli from Yahoo Sports is scheduled to join us in about 3 minutes. Before we get to that, guys, you know what time it is? It's code word time. It is code word time. You guys remember we gave out the code word for a $20 Quarterdeck gift card. First person to type in the code word in the YouTube live chat, first person to type it in will win. Just make sure, guys, whoever wins it, slide into my DMs. Send us a message, and I'll make sure I mail this to you. It'll be the actual one I'm holding in my hand, so you may want to sterilize it a little bit when you open it. It'll be this actual gift card right here in my hand. So first person to type in the code word will win the Quarterdeck gift card. So see, I don't think Kevin has popped in yet, so I want to get into to something before he pops in. Did you guys see or hear what Khabib Nurmagomedov had to say about ring card girls?
Fill us in, Alex. Yep.
Okay, so Khabib, and by the way, congratulations, Manny Fernandez. Manny Fernandez got it in. He is the winner of the $20 Quarterdeck gift card. And so Manny, I think he follows me on Instagram. Do me a favor, send me an Instagram message, and I will make sure that we ship this fine $20 Quarterdeck gift card to you. So congratulations, sir. Congrats. And he earned it because he was ready to type it in like way before we actually gave it. Oh, see, Cap, you got in a little late, my friend. So the way we're doing this now, just so you know, for next week, because we're going to do it the same way. Within the first 5 minutes of the show, I give out a code word, and the code word today was Diaz. So that, and it's not going to be the same thing next week. So within the first 5 minutes of the show, I give out a code word, and then I call for the code word at some point later in the 6 o'clock hour. And the first person to write back to us with the code word wins the $20 gift card. So Manny is the champion for today. So Khabib Nurmagomedov, he not only is he apparently playing professional soccer now, he's also bought a MMA promotion, a Russian MMA promotion called Guerrilla Fighting Championships. And he announced they will not have ring card girls for his promotion. And by the way, he's rebranding it to Eagle Fighting Championship. He says there will not be ring card girls. He says, look, I don't want to offend anyone. Ring card girls, he says, are the most useless people in martial arts. Well, you've just offended Ariane Celeste, sir. How dare you say I don't want to offend anyone? He continued, what is their function? He said, I have a question. You can show that it is the second round on the screen. Like, he doesn't see why it's necessary to have a bikini-clad babe holding up a number. And it probably isn't necessary, but I guess this dude has never heard of eye candy. Like, I guess like it is a completely foreign concept to Khabib. He says,
what did George Masvidal say? It's super necessary.
It's super necessary. He says, look, I don't want to offend anyone. He said, ring girls are the most useless. Oh, sorry, I already read that part. He says, I realized that there is a history behind ring card girls. History knows many mistakes, he said. We read history to avoid mistakes of the past and future. If we look in the history, it says they are useless. That is my personal opinion. Dana White maybe likes it, he says. Maybe you do too, but my name is not Dana. My name is Khabib, he says. And then he continued, and listen, I want to be respectful here because his father has passed away, but he did use his father as an example of why he doesn't like ring card girls. He says, I sit with my father at an event. Every person has his own preferences and culture and values. I come to fight and sit with my father. These ring card girls are passing by and showing people that it is the second round, but no one looks at the round number. I feel uncomfortable with my father. I am not against it, he says. If you want, you can do it, but don't impose it to me. Do it aside. There are the designated places for it, he says. I think we must not mix all of it. That is my personal opinion. So maybe at Eagle MMA FC, it's going to look normal without ring card girls. But you think about it, he talks about history. Like, we think about Las Vegas style showmanship, Vegas showgirls. Like, it works. Like, with what the UFC is doing, Bellator, it works, and if you're offended by a little eye candy, I apologize. But it works, man, to have ring card girls in that sport. I am personally not offended by it. I am all for it. What say you, Frank?
Well, it sounds like what's it going to be called? Eagle Promotions? Eagle something? Whatever it's going to be called.
Eagle Fighting Championship.
Eagle Fighting Championships might be the most boring live event that you could possibly go to, because now I'm assuming if you're going to follow this out, you're going to have the complete absence of any kind of ring girl action, but you're also going to have no alcohol, I'm guessing, and some of those other cultural rules. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be very fan friendly at the live events. I'll probably miss those, or maybe I will go to those because there'll be no penalty for being in the media section. Yeah,
that's a good point. Well, what do you think, James? Are ring card girls super necessary, or are you with Khabib on this one?
Look. If Khabib bought the organization and he's going to run it, he can do whatever he wants. There's so many other problems in MMA right now that ring card girls are not something that's at the top of my head in terms of fixing. Now, if he can figure out how to fix the judging in MMA, now that would be something. So focus on that and get back to me in terms of, fixing things in MMA. Ring card girls are, whether to have them or not have them, or if they're a problem or not a problem. That's way down the list on concerns with me. I can name 100 other things that I would like Khabib to really focus on and fix, and then bring that to, other, Bellator and UFC and other MMA organizations to fix.
Yeah, Frank, it's definitely not the most difficult job on the planet for, Ariane Celeste and whoever else, all the other ring card girls to hold up the card. But I don't know.
Don't act like you don't know any of their other names. Come on.
Who is it? Like, is Brittany Palmer still in the game? There's a lot of girls with the last name Andrade, because like all the Brazilian ring card girls, their last name it must be like Smith over there, because it's like Jenny Andrade, Julia Andrade. There's all these Andrade holding the ring card girls, but I don't know, man. I've never really honestly, I've never thought but you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, because the whole PC cancel culture, like they're against Hooters girls now, like that's suddenly offensive. Didn't they take the swimsuit competitions out of Miss Universe and Miss America? So I guess it kind of makes sense you would go after ring card girls. I just didn't think Khabib would be the guy going after them. I thought it would be like the cancel culture. I never really considered Khabib to be part of that, Frank.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not surprised his comments at all. I mean, he's a very devout Muslim, and they have very strict policies in terms of how they conduct themselves. And women walking around in lingerie holding up ring cards is not something that's going to be a tenet of his faith. I'm not making fun of it. I'm just pointing out the obvious. So I don't think there's it's not surprising to me in the least that he would feel that way. But speaking of cancel culture, I mean, like, when is this going to end? I mean, today the story breaks that the Notre Dame Fighting Irish Leprechaun has suddenly become offensive.
Really?
I don't know if you guys caught that story. It was ranked by some organization that I can't even remember who it is, because, like, who cares? But it was rated as the 4th most objectionable mascot in sports.
Wow.
So I mean, this culture has gotten to a point. I mean, it's just, and I was happy the university fired back and basically said, piss off, in so many words. But I mean, at some point, somebody's got to stand up and just say enough. I mean, enough.
Let's go out to the guest line. And I'm sure our next guest will remind everyone that the real star of this show is Frank Zaffere. James Walker and we are chopped liver. The man himself, boxing and MMA writer from Yahoo Sports, who does a tremendous job. Kevin Ioli is with us. Good evening, Kevin. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, except I take objection. When did I ever criticize James?
True. Oh my God, Kevin, we have so much to get to, and I'm curious your standpoint, your perspective on Paul versus Woodley, because you're a serious boxing writer. You've been doing this for such a long time, writing award-winning stories on the sweet science. Like, what is your interest and excitement level for Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley in boxing? Like, how does someone like you approach a fight like this?
Zero interest, honestly. There's nothing. I mean, I just, I wrote when the Paul brothers first started fighting, I wrote a column and I said, hey, I'm not against it if the guys are making money and it's not hurting anything. But, I think it's becoming a farce, what's really going on here. And I think it makes both sports look bad in a way. It's taken oxygen away from fighters that could use the coverage, especially boxing, where boxing doesn't get the kind of regular coverage that other sports do. And, now these guys are just getting so much of the coverage. I just don't like it. And I don't think it's proven anything. It's, and to me, I could do without it.
Kevin, I think one of the underlying storylines to this that probably isn't being talked about is the amount of money Woodley's going to make, and hence the reverse effect versus fighter pay in MMA. Do you think this kind of opens the floodgates a little bit? You have Anderson Silva boxing, you have Woodley, you had Ben Askren before that, probably made bigger purses than they made in MMA, probably in several fights combined. Do you think you might have people crossing over sooner? What do you think the future of this kind of gimmick boxing looks like in 2 or 3 years from an MMA perspective?
I would be shocked if it was going on 2 or 3 years. I mean, I would be shocked if we're still doing this on the regular 1 year from now. James, I think, obviously with Ben Askren, he made a career high purse on that. But I don't think that all the guys are, going to get paid like that, right? I think it's and Anderson Silva certainly made more money in MMA than he made doing that. And for the fight with Chavez. But and I'm for the guys to make the money. So I don't want to begrudge them the money. I'm just not interested in it. Right. And I think if you look at it from a pay standpoint, there has to be interest to, generate the ticket sales and everything. And I think the first thing I would say was, this is a Paul generated thing. It's kind of a unique thing. Once it becomes more commonplace, I think the people are going to get tired of it. His audience is really the only ones. Like, are there any MMA fans? Like, Tyron Woodley is not that popular among MMA fans. Yeah. Are there MMA fans out there going, come on, Tyron? I don't think that's happening, right? Boxing fans, don't care about the Paul brothers. So I think it really is like just the Paul's YouTube fans that are really, into this particular fight.
Yeah, I guess, Kevin, that would be my follow-up question is, what does this tell us about the emerging audiences for both sports? Because this fight probably will sell really well. and it will sell really well because I mean, I'm getting a little long in the tooth, so I'm getting more and more out of touch. But apparently, the young people, somebody like Jake Paul is somebody they want to see fight much more so than big name boxing stars that exist today, unfortunately. And certainly, and I think it's starting to happen similarly in mixed martial arts, where they'll be interested in this Tyron Woodley character that they may not have really known much about just because he's fighting this YouTube sensation. So I'm just wondering how you see both sports reacting to this, because they're going to follow the money, right?
I would disagree with your contention, to be honest with you, Frank. I don't know that is an accurate contention. I don't think the number is going to be as big as you think. My guess would be it's going to be smaller than what you think. And I just don't see this being a fight like it's happened a couple times now. I don't think boxing fans are into this fight. I don't think MMA fans are into the fight. So it's really going to be the YouTube fans. And hey, it'll be great for boxing if these people who became, boxing fans, so, I put quotes around that, to watch the Paul brothers stayed and became actual boxing fans. But really, they're fans of Logan and Jake. And that's who they're fans of. And so I don't think we're keeping them in the combat sports realm. When there's a fight in a couple of weeks from now, the same people that are buying this fight aren't going to buy that fight. So I just think I disagree with the contention, to be honest with you.
I hope you're right. So.
Yeah, me too. And Kevin, relatively speaking, just talent-wise, who's been the best MMA crossover into boxing? Because I'd probably say Anderson Silva or maybe even Conor. Like, who has impressed you most in a crossover fight?
Well, I guess, you have to say Conor because, he fought one of the greatest fighters of all time, and, he lasted 10 rounds, right? I mean, I think that just makes sense. Ben Askren did 0, in that, Anderson Silva fought a very poor, terrible Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I don't know that really proves much. So I think Conor would be the default answer there, right? If Woodley comes up, maybe he'll do it. But hey, look, there's a big difference between Jake Paul and Floyd Mayweather, and so I guess Conor just by default would be the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kevin, the last time we had you on, we were talking about MMA promoters and kind of where the pecking order falls behind the UFC. And like you mentioned, the war is won. No one is overtaking the UFC, and I completely agree with that. Do you think it would be beneficial for promotions like Bellator and PFL to maybe form an alliance and do some cross promotion? Like I was out at the PFL press conference down here in South Florida earlier today. I was live watching Kayla Harrison smash last week, and she smashed everybody in front of her in PFL. And then it kind of gets me wondering, like, if PFL and Bellator can find a way to co-promote a Cyborg versus Kayla Harrison fight, outside of Kayla going to the UFC, which may happen at some point, if she doesn't go into the UFC, that may, like, something like that could be the best option. So do you think it'd be beneficial for PFL and Bellator to maybe figure out some kind of an alliance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be probably a good idea, to be honest with you. I think if, I think people would be interested in that as a one-off fight, right? I think the success of the UFC to a large degree is they are largely looking to identify who is the best fighter in the world. And, so when they put their fights on, the rankings matter, the chase for the championship matters and everything else. And I think people look at it, while we know, like saying AJ McKee is one of the best featherweights in the world, I think, the impression the public has largely is that all of the best fighters fight in the UFC. And we know that's not necessarily true. So I think it would help, them on one-off basis if they did that, but I'm not sure that they have enough fights that the public would care about to do that on the regular, right? I mean, if we say they do that fight, and I think that's the one that's the most obvious, what's the next fight that they do? I mentioned AJ McKee. Who do you put up against him that would get people excited? I don't think that there's anybody out there. I think the reason that Kayla and Cyborg would be is because people would think, hey, this very well may be the best 145-pound fighter in the world, right? Or 155-pound fighter. I guess that's where they would fight.
Yeah.
That wouldn't necessarily be true in almost any other division.
Kevin, you and Alex kind of touched on my next question, but I was also at the fight last week. First time seeing Kayla Harrison in person. Probably seen her fight 3 or 4 other times on TV. Very impressed. She has one fight left on her contract. It's going to be for $1 million. What do you think her future is after October's fight, her last fight under contract with PFL?
I think the UFC certainly will make a run at her. I think she's going to, be out there looking at a lot of money. Now, I mean, she's going to have a lot of things to think about, right? Because the UFC has one fighter right now, in that division. They have Amanda, and Amanda's kind of like a part-timer in the division, and there's nobody else there. So I think that, Kayla is really a competitor. And one of the things I love about Kayla is, she, of course she's getting paid a lot of money. But she's doing it because she wants to prove herself, and she wants to prove that she's the best in the world. And that's what fueled her when she was in judo and went to 2 Olympic gold medals. And now I think that's what's fueling her in her run in MMA. Not necessarily money, but what is she going to prove in the UFC? There's one fight that she can take in the UFC, unless the UFC really makes a commitment to building a 145-pound division, which is going to be difficult for her to make on the regular. I know she's made it, but she's a big girl, and it's going to be tough for her to make that on a regular basis. And usually as fighters age, it's harder for them to make the lighter weights. If she outgrows the 145-pound division, then what? That's the concern. So I think she's got a lot of thinking to do about her future.
Yeah, Kevin, I got a couple UFC related questions for you. The three of us, we hadn't even gotten into yet Jared Cannoneer's victory over Kelvin Gastelum last week, and it was interesting in the post fight. And I thought both fighters looked good, quite frankly, and Cannoneer was just a little bit better. But he was asked in the post fight if he would like to wait around for the winner of the Izzy Whitaker fight, and he was like, "No, I'm broke. I need to keep fighting." So I mean, I guess this is a loaded 2-parter. Your take on Cannoneer's performance, and also what does that say, his comments about the fighter pay landscape?
Well, I think, it's a lot easier question to answer about his performance. I thought he looked really good. And, he's, I thought, a little bit too big for Gastelum. Gastelum's one of those guys, if they had a 178-pound division, might be the champion, right? I mean, he's losing a lot of fights against these big guys, but, he was, tooth and nail with Robert Whitaker, tooth and nail with Jared Cannoneer. I mean, been right in there with all these guys, but I think, not quite as big. He's a guy that hits hard, and the bigger guys take it a little bit better. And I think he's in a tough spot. Nothing he can do. He can't really make 170, and the next division's not to 185. If it was a similar guy in boxing, he'd move up to the next division and be rich. As far as the fighter pay is concerned, I think I've said this on your show before. Of course, I'm always in favor of fighters making more money. And I think there's a myth out there that the UFC fighters are, as a group, so badly underpaid. I don't think that is necessarily true, but they don't make the really big money that is made in boxing. But what I think you have in MMA is you have a middle class of fighter where they make, if they fight 3 or 4 times a year, they make anywhere from, $500,000 to a couple of $1 million a year over the course of 3 or 4 fights. And that's a really strong middle class, but that does not exist in boxing. In boxing, you have a lot of guys at the very top of the card that make a ton of money, that make more than the majority of MMA fighters. But then at the other end, they make nothing. There's got, when Mayweather made, what was it, $300 million to fight Manny Pacquiao, there was a guy on the Mayweather undercard who made $1,500.
Oh my God!
And so it's like, you mean to tell me that Floyd Mayweather's being guaranteed $100 million check that night, and with pay-per-view revenues making close to 300, and there's somebody making 15, right? That doesn't happen in UFC, and so I fall in the middle. I'm in favor of all the fighters getting raises, except for the Mayweathers and McGregors of the world, right? They're already getting what they need. But I'm in favor of all the fighters getting raises, but I don't know that I believe that this narrative that's out there is 100% true, that UFC fighters are being screwed. Now, what is the revenue really? I think there should be a better revenue split. And this trial that's going on, the antitrust thing that's seemingly been going on for half my lifetime. And I think when that comes out, maybe that might be the one vehicle that can help UFC fighters, not MMA fighters, but UFC fighters get a better revenue split.
Last thing I want to ask you, because we do have a UFC event this weekend, and I really like the main event because it's two of the best kickers in the UFC, Edson Barboza against the Giga kick himself, Giga Chikadze. How do you see that one finishing? Because Giga, he's one of my favorite fighters in the game right now, because this dude is going to smash your liver, he's going to smash your face, he's just going to plain smash you.
I love that fight. I mean, I wrote in my betting column that, if there was such a bet, bet on one of the two of them, or maybe both of them not being able to walk when the fight was over. I mean, because they're just going to kick the hell out of each other. I mean, I think that's really, what's going on here. I can make an argument for both guys. I kind of, if you're forcing me to pick a side, I kind of lean toward Giga to win the fight. And that's saying something, because I have immense respect for Edson Barboza, and he has fought way better MMA competition than what Giga has fought. I mean, you look at Edson Barboza's competition, and he is up there. I wrote last week about how good competition Kelvin Gastelum's fought. I think the same thing is true of Edson Barboza. I lean toward Giga for the simple reason he has that one-hitter quitter that I don't necessarily know that Barboza has in a fight of this level. But I think it's a 50-50 fight. My recommendation was to bet the under, and I'll stick with that. I think this is a fight that's not going to go 5 full rounds, and I think they're going to really tear each other apart. I look forward to this one.
Do you know what is the over-under, around 3.5?
I haven't seen a number. I use BetMGM. That's what we have a partnership at Yahoo, and it was not. They did not have a number when I put it up, so I haven't seen it yet. But it's definitely not going to go the distance.
I like it. I like it a lot, which is a prop in itself to not go the distance. So we appreciate the time here from Kevin Aioli. Awesome work. You guys want to check him out at yahoosports.com. And Kevin, you have any stories that either just went up or are about to come up that you want to promote? You mentioned the betting column, anything boxing or MMA you want folks to check out at yahoosports.com.
Well, yeah, today I did. I posted a story on Mayweather and Pacquiao, and kind of with Pacquiao's retirement, sort of how the two of them define boxing in the 21st century, and that posted today. And I wrote a story on Giga today, and I did a video interview with Edson that got posted today. So if people would check that out, I would be much appreciative.
I love it. Kevin Aioli, check out his work at yahoosports.com. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin I. Kevin, thank you so much. Enjoy your evening coming up.
And I love you, Alex. I'm never dogging you anymore.
You do. And I wouldn't even care if you didn't, honestly, but I do know you do. You are the man, the myth, the legend, Kevin. Enjoy the rest of your day out there in Vegas. I love it. And that was good. We got a betting tip from Kevin as well. I started giving out on my daily show, I started giving out daily betting tips, and I am even Steven so far this week. I went 2-0 on Monday, 0-2 on Tuesday. I got screwed over by a couple of underperforming teams who'd let me down, and I went 1-1 today, but slightly in the plus because my soccer parlay today was better than even odds. So we're doing all right. We just got the tip. The under or bet a stoppage. Bet fight will not go the distance between Giga and Barboza. Do you guys agree with that? Frank, I'll start with you because I know you're excited for this fight as well. Do you think somebody's getting knocked out? I hope it's a liver kick from Giga personally.
Yeah, I guess I would lean that way. I'm a huge Edson Barboza fan, so I'm affected emotionally in how I feel about picking this fight. But Edson is, I think he's getting back into a flow. I mean, I think he looks really, really good, super dangerous. And Giga, I can't say the last name, but he's great.
Chikadze.
But he has Yeah, this is a huge step up in competition for him.
Yes.
Big time step up in competition. So I'm sure he'll be somewhat ready for it. But I mean, until you're actually in there with Edson Barboza and facing what he's able to do to you with those kicks, I mean, I'm going with Edson right now. I'm going with the experience pedigree.
Frank, we're on the same wavelength here because I'm actually picking Barboza to win this as well. And Kevin brought up a good point that, look at the competition that Barboza has faced. He's been in there with the best of the best, including, the Khabibs of the world. Like he's faced the highest level of competition. And I think Barboza is one of those guys that he's appreciated, but he's underrated at the same time, if that makes sense. Like he can beat.
It makes sense, yeah.
He can beat 80% of the roster that he faces. It's just when he faces those Khabibs and those high level guys in their peak, he just can't get past that level. But everyone else, just about, he's like the.
Well,
go ahead, Frank.
Well, I was just going to say, James, you're right. It's wrestlers that has been his kryptonite. I mean, Kevin Lee, he had Kevin Lee knocked out cold. He just, Kevin Lee was able to fall back into a double leg and just, somehow find a way to get back on top of him. But I mean, it's the wrestlers that screw him up, I think.
Yep.
By the way, guys, speaking of Kevin Lee, I think that's a good segue. James sent us this story in our group chat today.
I brought up the name, bro.
Yeah, well, right. No, you're right. And I just think this comment, first of all, about the man he's talking about, regardless of my disagreement with Khabib on ring card girls, you cannot disrespect this dude as a fighter. So Kevin Lee, he was on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, which is the weekly news source is back, because when Ariel used to do that show previously, he would do 100 interviews a week and it would drive the MMA news cycle for the full week. So Ariel is back, and he had Kevin Lee on. Kevin Lee, and for some context here, he's lost 4 of his last 6 fights, and yet Kevin Lee is claiming that Khabib Nurmagomedov cannot be considered the GOAT because he had a lack of challenges. Basically, Kevin Lee is implying that since Khabib never fought Kevin Lee, you can't consider Khabib to be the GOAT. It's ridiculous. He says it's a little bit disappointing. He says, sometimes I feel like I say a little too much, and they got a good manager. He's talking about Ali Abdelaziz, is a smart man, Kevin Lee said. That's Khabib's manager. So he's seen me around a lot, and they did their best to keep him on the right path. So it's a little disappointing that fight never happened with me and Khabib if he doesn't come back. But I see the man out there playing soccer, so who knows? Maybe I'll pick up a soccer ball or something, kick something around, he said. So it's crazy because, like, Kevin Lee, if he could have won some big fights, like if he could have beaten Tony Ferguson, like he could have gotten an opportunity against Khabib. There's a reason why he never fought the lightweight GOAT, and that's because every time Lee had an opportunity to punch his ticket, he failed. So how can he complain, James?
Yeah, and just thinking back to Khabib's resume, I mean, who did he really duck? The Tony Ferguson fight didn't happen, but I wouldn't say that's ducking. They tried to book it 3-4 times, and one person backs out, the other person backs out, one guy falls off the stage, and just crazy stuff. Then you had the COVID situation. But other than Tony Ferguson, I can't think of anyone. He fought Conor, he fought Dustin Poirier. Who else did he beat? Who was his last
Justin
fight?
Gaethje.
Yeah,
Gaethje.
He beat Justin Gaethje. I really can't think of anyone in his division that he ducked per se. The fight with Kevin Lee didn't happen. But Kevin Lee's the wrong person with the wrong message with that. Like, he's not the fighter that would stamp Khabib's legacy, whether he fought him or not. I don't think that side of it really matters. But I just think it's the wrong message, and it's coming from the wrong guy. I mean, if Tony Ferguson said it, maybe you can consider it a little bit. But other than that, Khabib fought everybody that was in front of him.
I've always found Kevin Lee to be one of the most unlikable characters on the UFC roster.
Our friend JP Reese hates him.
Yeah, I mean, he's really hard to like. I don't know if I can put my finger on exactly why until James shared this anecdote in this interview comment from him. But when you see what Khabib did in his last 3 fights, with James's reference, he ran through those 3 opponents in a way that, I mean, his powers had never been higher. There was no one and nothing that could stop him in that division, which is why it's so surreal that he just walked away the way he did. I mean, just amazing.
Yeah. And on top of that, if you look at what some of those opponents have been doing, if you look at Dustin Poirier and what he's been doing before and after Khabib ran through him. If you look at what Justin Gaethje has done to guys, since Khabib, before Khabib ran through him. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just can't. I mean, who else other than Ferguson? He hasn't fought in the division really.
All right, guys, let's go out to the guest line and bring in an individual I consider to be one of the most hard-working members of the MMA media. I saw this guy coming up, grinding. He is a South Florida native. He is with MMA Junkie. He's been with MMA Fighting before. He is an absolute superstar. Danny Segura is with us, and I love. But this is the one guy. This is the one guy actually prepared to talk fighting on the stream. Like, he's the one guy who's got a fight poster in the background, so he is ready. Danny, how you doing, sir? Although he wasn't ready to hit the unmute button. That was the only thing.
Off to a great start, Alex. Off to a great start. Well, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I always come ready. I got the fight poster back there. I got Atletico Madrid back there, Colombia. Yes, I'm representing full.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not an Atletico fan, but that's the only big club in Spain that I tolerate because I'm a big fan of Cholo Simeone. And Manny Chang, by the way, Real Madrid fan Manny Chang is livid now. He's livid. I tolerate Atletico Madrid because, listen, Real Madrid, it's just too much money. It's not even fair. Barcelona, they're in the mud now with their financial situation. They just lost Messi, but I despise them. I at least have some respect for Atletico Madrid. And, of course, he is a Colombia native as well, Danny Segura. And, Danny, I saw you recently. We caught up a little bit at the PFL event last Thursday night, and it was great seeing you out there. And I'm kind of curious because you've been to big UFC events, Bellator events, PFL. How does the production like PFL, just from the standpoint of the operation they put on, the sets, the lighting, the media relations, how did they compare to you to the big boys? Because I think they're doing a good job.
Yeah, they are. They're right up there, especially the production. It's very unique. If you watch it from a live standpoint, obviously the setup is very, very unique, very different the way they run things. If you watch it from the TV, obviously it's much different as well compared to the rest of the MMA products. It has a very sports feel to it, right? Like if you're watching, NFL, football, whatever it is. And, obviously they're going that route on purpose because their whole thing is, look, we're not a regular MMA promotion. We're actually something closer to a sport. That's why we have a season and playoffs. So I really enjoy it. And I think, from a PR standpoint, they handle themselves very well. They got some veteran people working there that have been around for some time. And all in all, I mean, I think it's a top-notch promotion.
Hey, Danny, you were just describing their format and having a regular season. Do you think that sets them up better as, I don't want to diminish them by saying what I'm going to say, but I think it's the best way to exist, is a better version of a farm system to get to the UFC. If you have a season, you have a tournament, you have you succeed in a purely sports way, not because you talked a lot of trash or whatever. So you get this, this finished product that then the UFC can turn around and say, okay, look, that person just ran the gauntlet. That's somebody we want to sign.
Certainly. I think that's a true statement. I think if, you declare yourself a PFL tournament winner, automatically you're going to have a target on your back as far as other promotions wanting to sign you, because it is a grueling tournament. You're getting 4 fights in 8 months, and, you're going to have to deal with a lot. I mean, not this season, but the season prior, at one point you had to fight twice in one night. Only the greats can do that, right? Yeah. If you're a mediocre fighter, you're not going to be able to get to the top and win $1 million. So I think it's a great way to highlight a fighter. Obviously, the winner, I think, as I said, is going to have a target on their back. But I also think it's a great promotion to keep fighters around. I was just talking earlier today to Antonio Carlos Jr., who fought in the UFC, and he's not really digging the trash talk. He's not really digging all the politics that go on over there. And one of the reasons why he switched from the UFC to PFL, and he's a great fighter. I mean, he beat some of the best middleweights in the world. And he's like, look, here, if I win $1 million, and I get to the final. I don't depend on anybody. If I don't talk trash or if I don't do a bunch of media, that's not going to hold me back. So I think it does work for the UFC as a feeder system as well. But I also think it provides an outlet to fighters that are very good, but just don't want the politics side of it.
Danny, something also about PFL that I think is interesting is they committed to South Florida by putting their semifinals and their finals here, which are pretty much their biggest events of the year. I was actually at the Demetrius Johnson, Ian McCall fight, which was here or at BB&T Center.
Yes,
wasn't
sir.
very well attended, and I feel like there's
you and me.
Yeah. And
I was there too.
You me and Danny. Frank, were you there at that one?
I was there. Remember, that was the one the UFC sent us bricks of tickets for. Remember, they couldn't get anyone to buy a ticket. Yeah.
So we were the 4 people. This is a historic moment that we were the 4 people in that crowd.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to my question in terms of what do you think needs to happen? Because there's a lot of great camps and great fighters that train here, but I think there's a hesitancy from the big promotions to really put their best fights on in South Florida.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The South Florida crowd, you would think that they would just eat up all combat sports because, as you said, we have great gyms down here, and I think that helps. I mean, if you just look at some of these events, a lot of the people that attend are fighters, students, right? They're related to the gym as well. But I think it also has a big community of fight fans. It's just not used to events, right? For example, Las Vegas, obviously the fight capital of the world, they had to develop that, right? New York City, right? MSG, the Barclays Center, they had to develop prestige. You just can't deliver that and get to that point overnight. So I think, with all the amount of fights that we're seeing, because South Florida in the pandemic era has been treated well as far as combat sports, I think that can turn things around. And all of a sudden, if you're getting events left and right, you are looking for that at StubHub. You are looking for that in wherever you get your tickets, and you're a little bit more alert, right? I think for that Ian McCall fight, Demetrius Johnson right here, to be honest, they didn't do a good job at promoting it. That's also a big part of it too. I knew a lot of people that were fight fans, and for that fight week, they didn't even know a fight was going on at the BB&T Center. So you got to promote it. You got to do it right. And the more events and the more culture we create here, I think the better.
Danny Segura from MMAJunkie.com is with us here on 5 Rounds on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I would argue the biggest fight the UFC could hypothetically make right now is one we've been talking about, and that would be Jon Jones against Francis Ingannu. Now, obviously, Francis is going to defend his title coming up before he would ever see Jones. But, there have been some negotiations. We know Jon has been dealing with Dana on this, and in Dana's mind, they're asking for a little bit too much money. In my mind, I think you pay them whatever because that fight is so huge. Do you think this is going to happen, Danny? Is this fight too big not to happen? And how long is it going to take to make it?
I think Jon Jones is going to have to give in order for this fight to happen, right? The UFC holds all the cards at this point. The UFC has no incentive to pay them more, right? Like, they're doing fine without them, right? Like, Jon Jones hasn't fought in how long, right? Like over a year now. And the UFC has been doing fine. The UFC has, Dana White especially has always said, look, we put on fights every weekend. You either want to fight or you don't. And I think, over the years, we've missed out on some big fights, because simply the UFC didn't want to pay more. So I think, the money that Jon Jones is asking, I just don't see the UFC putting out that much for a title fight. I think they might get a little closer, but Jon Jones is definitely going to have to maybe take a step down in expectations. My gut is that I don't want to jinx it because I want to see it, but to be honest, I feel like it's not going to happen.
Whoa.
Wow.
So Danny, I don't disagree. Danny, I don't disagree, but I wanted to ask you, do you think UFC strategy goes a little beyond that? I mean, Jon Jones is a pain in the ass. He's a pain in the ass right now in contract negotiations. He's been a huge embarrassment in terms of outside of the cage incidents over the years. Do you think that they fear that the talent level that he has, if they capitulate, pay him, give him the fight, he's going to win probably, and then they have their reigning heavyweight causing them all kinds of stress and irritation moving forward? Do you think that might be something to do with it?
I think that's certainly a thing, but they've also just been dealing with him for so many years. I don't feel like it'd be like a new headache. You know what I'm saying? It'd just be something that they already used to dealing with. I don't think it comes down to that, because we've seen fighters that are fairly not to say problematic, but hard to work with in the UFC, giving them, good fights and putting them in good situations. So I don't think that's that big of an issue. I think it plays a little bit of a factor. I think it comes down to the money. They not only because they don't want to pay that money, but they don't want to set a precedent, because once you pay a guy that much money, once you pay a guy, let's say, 15 million or whatever it is, in that purse, right? It just sets a new bar. And then other fighters are going to be wanting that, right? And how do you control that? So I think the UFC just wants to keep the status quo. That's like the main priority here for them.
Danny, we the three of us have had this discussion and debate on previous shows, but I wanted to get your take on Dustin Poirier and his recent chosen path. It seems like he's naming everybody except Charles Oliveira, for the title. He's calling out Nate Diaz now. He fought Conor twice when he could have had a title shot. Is Dustin smarter than everybody else because he's making the most money, or is he not doing the right thing by going after the title, which he could have had a title shot, 4 or 5 months ago, but he's seemingly doesn't have much interest in it versus the big money fights?
Yeah. I think at this point, he understands that he's probably the best lightweight, in the UFC. I think if you talk to most people, although, look, I respect Charles Oliveira a ton. I think he's a great fighter. In fact, I chose him to win the title when he fought Michael Chandler. But I think if you ask most people right now, the best fighter at 155 pounds is Dustin Poirier. He knows that, people know that. And he knows that once he gets the belt, he can't really pick and choose. He doesn't have that much fluidity. There's going to be title defenses coming, and there's going to be number one contenders thrown his way. So right now, he's got a big name. He's got the skills to defeat anybody. So why not pick the matchups that make the most sense for him money-wise? And look, that title shot is always going to be there as long as he keeps winning. So I think, he's extremely brilliant. I think he's extremely smart, and he's realizing, like, hey, the UFC title's cool and all, but having a few extra $1 million in my bank account, that's a little bit.
I'll take that.
Danny, speaking of a few extra $1 million, we had Kevin Iole on before you, and we were talking about the Paul Woodley fight. And I expressed some concern to him because I'm getting really old, right? So I can't relate. So I'm glad that you're here now, because Kevin could not relate either. Kevin basically said to us that he didn't think that this kind of a trend would continue. But I'm terrified that it's actually the new age of what we're going to be seeing. And the reason I say that is because I'm generationally out of touch with people now. But this Paul character and his brother, they have billions of views of stuff and millions of followers, and are creating multi-million-dollar events in sports that they have no business even participating in, really. So I'm terrified that, I wanted to come off to James's comment because he's talking about UFC guys not wanting to actually fight for titles anymore. But are we going to start to see this whole thing degenerate into this kind of spectacle? Because what we're getting with Paul and Woodley is just a spectacle, right?
Yeah, this is very interesting. It's hard to tell where it's going to go, right? If it's just a thing of this weird sort of time frame, like a couple of years that happened, then maybe 10 years from now we'll look at it. Remember when all these guys wanted to fight YouTubers, or if it's something that's going to be a thing for the future? I don't know the answer to that, but what I do think is that Jake Paul and just the Paul brothers, they're very smart. And I forgot what interview it was, but this was before he was boxing, like I guess legit MMA fighters, right? Like Woodley and Ben Askren. But he was talking about how there is a side of the business. There is a huge untapped market for putting up these type of fights. And there's a lot of people out there that are not really interested in seeing the best fight the best. They're not really interested in seeing, beautiful technique. They don't care about that. What they care is, it's the whole high school thing, like, oh, the popular kid is fighting the other popular kid, the sort of reputation's on the line. Let's see what's up. So I think that's what they're targeting. And I do think that's here to stay. I think there's going to be some times where maybe it fizzles because there isn't the names, but somebody will come along and pick up some beef with somebody on social media or whatever. And the ultimate way to settle it is, let's put on some gloves and let's scrap it out. So sadly, I think it's here to stay.
Yeah. I would tend to agree, because I feel like society is embracing this stuff more and more, not less and less, right? I mean, I guess I've been wrong about trends before, because who the hell am I to predict the future? But I agree with Danny and Frank on that. And Danny, I want to get your take on something that I think we're all very excited for this weekend. two of the best kickers in the UFC, Edson Barboza and the Giga Chikadze going head to head this weekend. Who do you see pulling it out? And do you think we're going to get a kick ending to the fight, or is this just going to end up disappointing us and going to decision?
No, I think if it goes to decision, we're still not going to be disappointed. This is going to be a war with two guys that have huge egos in the best way, because they're both super nice. But as far as their striking skills, they truly do believe they're the best strikers in the UFC. And, they're going to be proving that, or trying to prove that, with every single strike. So I'm super stoked about this matchup. I think Edson Barboza is going to pull it off. I think he's just had a weird reinvention at 145 pounds. I mean, he looked terribly going down to that weight class, just like Jose Aldo did to 135 pounds. But somehow these Brazilians are making it work. They're getting down to that weight, despite being actually good size for their weight classes when they fought a division above. But yeah, he looks strong. He looks fast. His cardio holds up. His chin is holding up, and he's got tons of experience. I think this is going to be a similar bout to the one that he had prior against Shane Burgos, where, this guy's young. This guy's got a lot of things that could pose dangers to Edson, but Edson's seen it all. So I'm going to go with Edson, and I think it's going to be – I don't think he finishes Giga Chikadze. I think he's too tough and too smart technically to get finished, but we're going to see just a brutal fight where we're going to be wincing for 3 rounds with Edson getting his hand raised at the end.
I love it. Danny Segura, before we let you run, I want to give you an opportunity to promote your work, especially because I think our South Florida audience could be really interested in this. Now, this is something that Frank, James, and I do not provide because we do not speak Spanish. You do, and you provide a lot of, in addition to English content, you provide a lot of Spanish language comment for MMA Junkie as well. And I know a lot of people in our audience would be interested in checking that out. So where can they find all that, and where can they find you?
Yeah, so all my English work can be found at MMA Junkie. My Spanish work can be found as well as MMA Junkie, but you can also head to the YouTube channel Hablemos MMA, which means just talking MMA in Spanish. And basically I have Spanish language interviews with all the top Hispanic fighters in mixed martial arts. I do a little bit of boxing as well. I got an interview coming with Brandon Moreno, who had a lot to say about Alexander Pantoja, Cody Garbrandt dropping to his division, as well as Santiago Poncinibio and Vicente Luque. So I have those interviews dropping this week. And if you were looking for Spanish language content in MMA, head over to Hablemos MMA.
Now, and I'm guessing you probably collect fight posters, because you can't tell me the only fight poster you have is Johnson versus McCall.
So I used to, and I stopped. So I got a bunch of old ones. I just don't have space anymore. And this was actually right here. I keep pointing the other way. But this is actually the first UFC event I ever attended. I actually
nice.
So all right, then I'm not going to make fun, because we were gonna ask how hard the guy at the frame store laughed when you came in with that poster.
No, the frame I got it pretty cheap. I forgot where. I think at the time on eBay or something. But I know it's not the greatest card, but it is signed, and it was my first event that I ever covered, so it has a special place in my heart. The 4 of us, we witnessed that whole thing, and we had the arena to ourselves. So
this is like a reunion of those who attended Johnson versus McCall. So listen, this was so awesome, and everyone, make sure you not only check out Danny's work, but check him out on Twitter as well at Danny Segura TV. Thank you so much, my friend, for joining us. We'll talk to you again.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Great insight, and I love it. And he even Alex M commented on his fight poster. That poster in the back is sick, and it kind of makes me feel bad because, like, guys, I am so bad when it comes to any sort of sentimentality and memorabilia, because I've noticed, I don't know, and James, obviously you were, Frank, you're the guy who goes to events as a fan so you can drink cocktails. James, right, over the years, he's covered a lot of events, and he's covered NFL games. Are you one of those guys, because I see a lot of people do this, who, like, they keep all of their credentials, like they say, like I've seen people make collages out of them, hang them up in the house. Dude, I've been to, over the last 15 years since I've been in the sports media space, I probably have, well over 100, or I've compiled well over 100 credentials. Most of them just end up going in the trash. Like I'm not sentimental whatsoever.
Yeah, I kept a good amount of them, probably less than half. I have a lot of them in my office, probably about 20 or 30 hanging up in my office, and maybe another 20 or 30 in my shoebox. But some of them, especially when I'm on the road, they don't leave the hotel. Once I get on my flight, stuff like that. And there's parking passes and credentials and all that kind of stuff. But now that I'm out the business, now that I'm 3-4 years out of the business, I kind of look back at them with more reverence than I did when I was doing it every week. It's just one of those things of just kind of being away from it now. You kind of appreciate it a little bit more than you did at the time.
Yeah, because Frank, for me, I think the only credentials I've saved are just the ones that are in my car, because I don't clean out my car very often. So I may have 2-year-old fight credentials in there somewhere.
I was just laughing at maybe the once or twice that somebody gave me credentials as an alleged member of the media. I mean, the hypocrisy was just too great. I couldn't keep it. I had to throw it away.
Oh man! And by the way, I want to get both of your takes on something, because I see the way that, and this is not certainly exclusive to the fight game, because I see it happening even in the NFL. I saw this memo that went out that this upcoming season, for the second straight year, and I get it, they made this change due to COVID, but I have found in sports and society, when they take things away from you, they tend not to ever give them back. So for the media this coming NFL season, and that's, despite the fact that, and I get it, this Delta variant is bad. So I don't this year is understandable, but there's not going to be any open locker room access for NFL media this coming year. There's only limited team personnel can get into the locker room, so independent media members cannot. And again, they can say this year, and it's justified, it's because of the pandemic. I don't imagine they're giving that back. And even for MMA promoters, I've noticed that a lot of press conferences, people are able to ask questions over Zoom, and you don't really have to be there anymore. So and I guess we'll start with the actual media guy on this, but before we get to the cocktail drinker, James, do you think the way that events are covered by the media is changing forever? Do you think that the things that are being taken away are ever going to be given back?
Yeah, I think it is changing forever for the worse. And really, this has been in motion even before COVID. And I'll give you a little inside baseball. When I first started covering the NFL, this was in 2003. So you're talking 18 years ago was my first year covering the NFL. Used to stay at the team hotel. There was even an option. It was in the latter years. It depended on the team, but there was an option to even sort of travel with the team at the time. And before me, you're talking 20, 25 years ago, you could travel with the team, at that time. That was crazy access that you had. Then slowly as the years gone by, you're talking 2005, 2008, stuff like that. All that stuff was being taken away. You could start to see sort of a different kind of separation. And by 2013, 14, 15, it was a complete, us versus them, media over here, team over here, kind of thing. I think social media did play an aspect with that, to where there was just a little more nosiness in terms of what's going on off the field in a person's life versus what happens between the lines. When I first got in the business, it was about the game. It was about the sport. It was about what happens in between the lines. I mean, I've seen stuff at team hotels that, I don't say to anybody, you know what I mean? In terms of what I've seen the day and the nights before games, because I had that kind of access to team hotels. As that time has changed, the media has changed, and there's reporters that probably would report that stuff now that wouldn't report it, 15, 20 years ago. So it's been a change. It's been gradual, less and less access, and it's gotten to the point where COVID, I think, has kind of expedited that, to where they took it away now, where you don't have locker room access, and there's really no reason for teams to give it back. Especially in the NFL. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. They're not lacking for media coverage per se. It's only hurting the reporters and their relationships, with players. But I really don't think the teams care much at this point. And last point I want to make is interesting that I read the rule that the NFL has. They're letting team affiliated reporters in the locker room, but not any other media. That tells me all I need to know. It's about money. It's about having that access so they can put their videos, their interviews up on their team-related websites, get the clicks, get the money, get the advertising. They don't care about outside media outlets getting clicks, getting advertising, and things like that. So it's mostly about the money with this, in my opinion.
Yeah, that answers that. Then that was what I was going to wonder, because really, why does anyone have to be in the locker room? I've always wondered that. Why wouldn't they have look, if I'm a professional athlete and I've done a game, the locker room should be my space for me and my teammates. And then there's some place beyond the locker room. But I've never understood the standing in front of you in a towel, asking your impression, and why I need, as a fan, I need that kind of access. And I think you're 100% right. What would what would the perception of him be like had he existed in this social media world that we live in today? So I think as that's gotten more and more invasive, you see a greater and greater restraint in terms of athletes trying to prevent people from doing that kind of investigative journalism, because there is nothing sacred anymore. Anything that gets a click is going to get reported. So, but I don't know why you have to be in a locker room. I don't know. Maybe you guys can explain that to me. You've been going to locker rooms a long time, you guys. So I don't know why it has to happen there.
I'll let James explain it, because he covered the NFL a lot longer than I did.
Yeah, I'll tell you from a reporter's perspective, the ability to build a relationship with the person, looking them in the eye, asking them questions that don't necessarily have to do it with football or, fighting or whatever particular sport that you cover. You just can't do that in a Zoom call. If I'm having a one-on-one, a lot of times when I was reporting, I would go, to different guys in the locker room that weren't necessarily being talked to a lot, the non-star players, get to know them, get to know their families, get to know them as people. And I think that relationship building helps over time. So I think that more than anything is being missed out. And I think that's why you have a lot of reporters complaining, because it's really a complete separation. It's just, you're talking to a guy through a computer, a male or female through a computer, and you can't really build any kind of rapport. They don't really have any feel for you as a reporter. So every reporter looks the same to them because you're just talking through a computer screen.
Gotcha.
Well said. And listen, as we close out this episode of 5 Rounds, I want to send, first of all, a huge thank you to our guests on this episode. Danny Segura from MMAJunkie.com was awesome, even though he triggered Manny Chang a little bit with the Atletico Madrid flag, because Manny is a huge Real Madrid fan. Just keep making those bids for Kylian Mbappe. They keep getting rejected, Manny. Don't even worry about it. Huge thanks to Danny. Huge thanks to Kevin Ioli from Yahoo Sports, and to everyone who chatted with us live. Huge shout out, congratulations to Manny Fernandez for winning the gift card. Congratulations, sir. Alex M, Cap for Life, Trevor Gaffney, or some of those who popped in tonight. Huge thank you to everyone for tuning in and for making us a part of your evening. And guys, check out the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. I'm telling you, you won't be disappointed. I mean, our guy Manny is going to be styling and profiling with the $20 gift card that he won today. We're going to be giving away gift cards every week, by the way. I hold it in my hands here. $20. I've got a handful more of these that we will be giving away each week and mailing out. So guys, make sure to check out the seafood. It is so fresh. The oysters and Maine lobster. I love the sushi. I think Alex was a little bit late on that code word. Yeah, let me remind you guys, this is how we do it. Okay. At the start, near the start of every show, within the first 5 minutes or so, we announce a code word. Today's code word was Diaz. I'll try and think of a different one next week. We may just go Diaz every week. I don't know. But I give out a code word near the start of the show, and then later in the 6 o'clock hour, you don't know when. It could be 6:20, 6:45, 6:59. At some point before the clock strikes 7, I cue the code word, and the first person to send us the code word wins a $20 Quarterdeck gift card. So make sure you check out the fresh seafood, the 2-for-1 happy hour. That never ends. 2-for-1 happy hour all day, every day at the Quarterdeck. Check out the Dania Beach location. Beautiful views. You feel like you're on vacation out there on the pier. I know James knows what I'm talking about.
It's my favorite.
He is a frequent guest of the Dania Beach location. And try that delicious food, man. I had the French dip sandwich yesterday. I'm going to have the mahi-mahi sandwich the next time that I get out there. If you want to peep their menu before you go, because if you're like me, you like to take a look. I like to decide what I'm going to eat before I even get there, and then I change my mind several times when I get there. But if you want to peep the menu before you go, or you want to find the location nearest to you, visit quarterdeckrestaurants.com and check out every UFC pay-per-view fight at the Quarterdeck for zero cover charge. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. Well, gentlemen, we'll say our goodbyes. Frankie Z, you want to plug the Twitter handle? Because I know we're trying to get that follower count up. Where are you at lately?
I've lost a few. I gained a few, and I realize they're not real followers. They're these like robotic followers that are just using what they think might be, real followers in my thing to spread their virus. So I'm hanging right at a solid 41.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to get to 50. I'm trying to get to my age. So if anyone wants to help me out with that, and then I'll stop trying to grow the Twitter list. Just trying to get to 50.
What about you, James?
Well, since you brought up the opportunity, I actually just launched today, as a matter of fact, a mentorship business called the Athletic Mentor.
Awesome.
.com, and we're really going to look at. I'm teaming up with Roger Harriet, head coach of St. Thomas Aquinas, and there'll be more coaches that I'll team up with, as things grow. But we're really going to help a lot of youth football athletes kind of clear up the whole mess with the scholarship process and trying to do that. And we're also going to teach leadership skills, public speaking, media skills, character building. We're going to do a lot of things that I wish I had access to when I was a teenager in high school. As a high school athlete. So that's athleticmentor.com.
Dude, that is awesome. And I'm glad you brought that up because I saw you say on Twitter this morning that you had an announcement, and then I didn't actually see what the announcement was. So I'm glad you brought it up there. That is really great what you're doing there. So huge
Appreciate
shout
that.
out. You guys can follow me at Alex Donno. Check out my daily show as well. Noon to 1 p.m. We're going to be back tomorrow talking Dolphins, Heat, and Canes, noon to 1 p.m. And that show is brought to you by the Quarterdeck as well and by betus.com. I'm going to be giving out a couple of my wagers tomorrow to bet along with me. Go ahead, Manny. Man, by the way, follow Manny as well.
No, do not follow me unless you love Gator football or Real Madrid. Huge.
You're right. Don't follow Manny.
Yeah, don't follow Manny. Huge show tomorrow for Donno, 5 Hour Live. Ethan Skolnick will drop by to talk Tua and Dolphins. Why hasn't Tua gotten any love? And then we'll have at 12:40, we'll have Ricky J. Mark to drop some NBA knowledge as well. So big
Dude, that is a great show.
On Donno.
That is a great. And I got to talk some crypto with Ricky as well. We actually have and I need to add James in there as well. I don't know if Frank is into crypto, but we have like a crypto 5 reasons chat. And Ricky is nonstop. He loves it. Anytime there's a new NFT or a new fan token on Socios, he is all over it. Oh, I will not have that Go Gators propaganda. So for James and for Frank and for Manny Chang in the back doing awesome work, I am Donno. We will talk to you guys next week. I think we're back to Thursday next week to bring you some fight news right here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.